Hello, Salesforce Ohana. Today we've got Franklin Aldrich, an Army veteran, somebody who has transitioned successfully into a Salesforce career. And he's just been an awesome resource. He's also gone through the Cloud Code Developer Kickstart program and has gotten his PD1 certification, which we'll probably jump into in a bit. It's super great to have you on today, Frank, and having you just talk about your experience in Salesforce and learning development through the program. So I'll give you a chance, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll jump into some other stuff here.
So yeah, I've been in Salesforce for over 6 years now at this point. I got into Salesforce by one of my mentors reaching out to me. I was going through college and I was just blindly taking classes because that's what you do when you get out of the service if you don't really have a plan. And he told me about Salesforce, dove right in, went through Amerivis, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that helps veterans transition into Salesforce. It's for mil spouses as well and veterans. So those are like 3 different categories that everyone gets lumped in together. So I got my first job at Accenture Federal Services as a tester, which is something I want to point out for listeners that may be trying to break into Salesforce. You don't always have to go straight into the role that you want to get. I started off as a tester, moved into configuration, which is where I got into, back then it was process builder, workflows, and the beginnings of Flow before it was as robust as it is now.
Now you're dating yourself.
I was just chipping away at that for, like I said, 5 years now. And then always had a interest in coding. I always thought it was cool to be able to do that type of stuff. I actually took the exam in 2022 and failed it twice. And I was 2 questions away from it. And then that kind of fizzled out as I moved into the job I have now, which is more of a consulting role. So business analysis and light configuration.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear your story as you've been moving along through this different journey, just potentially not knowing like where you wanted to jump into, being sent in or being told about Salesforce and just kind of riding that wave as you're continuing to learn and challenge yourself with different things. So I'm super curious, right? Because you have that kind of tester background, then moving into an admin, then getting into the development side of things. So what was your feelings or what were your thoughts around learning development, or I guess going after the exam as well, but like learning development, why did you kind of pick the cloud code route for kind of locking in those fundamentals and learning those things versus going a different route? Why was this important to you?
Yeah, so I found Cloud Code. I actually had you on the CareerCast, which was a podcast that I had started that kind of fizzled out. So there's like 40 some episodes on Spotify if anyone wants to check that out. That's when I found out about Cloud Code, but that was before I got serious about it. Going back to my first couple roles, I would always be capped by what it could do. And that was where my knowledge stopped. And I don't like having gaps, so I'd always feel bad about not being able to handle certain things. So, yeah, I puttered around with it and tried the YouTube route, which there's a ton of great resources out there.
For sure.
There's probably like a handful that I really trust. So I was doing that for a while, and like I said, I got real close but never passed. And the issue, looking back now, is I was solely focused on the exam. I just wanted to pass the exam, and I didn't have that core knowledge. I kind of got a break from the role that I was in, had allowed some study time, and then I decided to get serious about development. That's where I want to go moving forward, the actual development and architectural route. And, you need PD1. In that pyramid that they have, you need PD1. So I was like, all right, now I'm going to dive back in. And then after having you on the podcast, like I had mentioned, that was my first choice to look into and reach out. And Cloud Code specifically is great because you learn how to be a developer. You don't learn how to pass the exam, which is, again, I think was the biggest issue that I was facing. So yeah, the structure of Cloud Code was really good. You're learning the basics. You get into GitHub, you learn how to push and pull files to your machine and, push up changes, which is core to the whole concept of development. Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to pinpoint cloud code because you get a robust like knowledge base. So you go from zero all the way to creating a project, and you're learning those key things. Like a lot of people that, especially someone that does flow, you get the base knowledge of like variables and which are if then kind of statements, but and loops. I would say those are like the big three things that you learn with flow that kind of carries over. But once you start getting into classes and triggers and kind of the more complex things, I'm working with maps. So that's where cloud code kind of helped me pass the exam, I will say. And again, that's kind of secondary to actually learning the skill set. So I can't say enough about cloud code.
And you really open up a can of worms, right? Once you go from flows and start doing that transition, you then jump into, okay, now that I have these structures that I can put in place to build more complex business logic, it's like the world is your oyster, right? You can start writing integrations, you figure out triggers, asynchronous apex, and how to string it all together in a more complex way. It's more complex because they give you more controls, more functionality behind it. Flows are getting super powerful now, but you're still kind of on rails. You're stuck in the box that Salesforce gives you. Once you move into the development route, it really starts to push you into a few other areas where you just need to start. You're opening up the book of like software engineering and architecture that you're going to start having to think about. And that's super cool to hear that you knew that you needed to learn these skill sets for the next chapter where you wanted to go in your career in terms of either being an architect and completing all the certifications for like application and system architect, that kind of stuff, because it can be a real hindrance for a lot of people that are coming through and very experienced admins. They're doing great, but they just can't beat the PD1 exam. And a lot of it comes down to that like hands-on nature that we really instill in cloud code, which is, you're learning this fundamental stuff because it's good to understand it and it's good to know how to apply it. And then as an added bonus, since you know how to do it all, you'll have an easier time passing the Platform Developer 1 certification. We do want you all to be able to prove out your skill sets to Salesforce and your employers by getting the cert. But for me, the most important thing is that you actually know how to code, right? If I throw an if statement or if I throw a trigger in front of you, can you read through it? It may take you a little bit, but that's fine, right? You're not completely scared of it, which is how some people come into the program. They're like, all right, I as soon as I see a semicolon, I'm done. I'm not touching it or anything like that. So it's great to hear that you're able to accomplish what you set out for, which one portion of that is really knocking out that PD1, but then also moving your career further along for where you want to go. I'm curious if you had any specific concepts or challenges that you faced inside of Cloud Code that maybe you can give a warning or a preface to some people that it was just hard, but you were able to figure it out, but something that you're potentially pretty proud of as you're going through it.
Yeah, this is a good one. And some of the challenges with Cloud Code is the rate at which your cohort moves through. I had a struggle with keeping up. Once you hit like week 6 or 7, it's like, okay, now we're getting serious. And then you kind of, I wouldn't say fall behind, but you kind of take a step back and go over things that you learned those first couple weeks, and it can slow you down. But again, it's not a race. I think a lot of people are in that mindset where you have to keep up with everyone, but you don't know people's backgrounds, right? Unless you just come out and ask them. Like a class in college or had been working with development before. I mean, if somebody knows Java, they like coming over to Apex is going to be super easy. So even if they are admins or were doing that before. So, I mean, you really can't compare your progress to anybody else but yourself. Set a timeline. I mean, even for me, like the main cohort was 4 months and, you have access for a year. So I went through the cohort and then I didn't take the exam for another 8 months. So it was like more than 3 years if you want to go back to when I started taking the test before I actually passed. I think LinkedIn, social media in general, you see people's highlight reels and, you see people getting the certification and get down on yourself. The other thing was time management. I have a wife and 3 kids. I'm doing cloud code in the evenings, getting up early to kind of start my day with some code. That's a little tip there. Like, do a little bit every day, even if it's writing a simple trigger or a quick for loop. But, being able to manage your time, and that kind of ties into going at your own pace. It took me about halfway through the cohort to realize that I couldn't keep up with somebody that has, they have their 9 to 5 and then they work from 5 to 9. That just wasn't my reality. So time management and not comparing yourself to others' progress would be my 2 kind of things that I struggled with.
What is it? Comparison is a thief of joy. And I try to do my best, and all the instructors in the program try to do their best to remind everyone, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. You are learning this stuff to really lock in the material, not to just complete cloud code and like get a check mark, right? And even if you do that, you've got to pass the capstone project. So you have to really understand it to make sure that you're getting the final stamp of approval. But even the little bit, or the taking the steps daily, like you were saying, just putting in the effort, even if it's at your own pace, right? You're still learning this incredible skill set that you can then apply to many different facets of your life, right? Not just at work, but a lot of it is at work. But then you'll start to see potentially patterns and other systems and interactions that you're doing, where you can think more logically or think like a computer, use that development skill set that you're building out to then be able to just accomplish more. So I think that's the really cool part, and something that it's easy for us to say, but a little bit harder to actually convey or to actually lock it in for the people that are going through it, right? And seeing those highlight reels. And the one thing I like to remind everybody is, like, I'm no genius, right? I wasn't born and I knew how to code really well. It was that I found this stuff interesting and I just stuck with it for a long time. I've been doing this for like 10 plus years now. And that's really the only difference between, like, you, whoever's watching this, and you're just now getting started, right? You're most likely smarter than me. It's just about the time that you put in it, right? So continue to say, like, coding every day, inundating it with yourselves, and just continue to building it up, because it is like learning a language, right? Apex is a coding language. So the more practice, the more time you put in it, the better you will be at understanding it and being able to apply it for some of the things that you actually need to do.
Yeah,
So I'm curious.
It's definitely a personal problem. The instructors were very clear on, you're not falling behind. They said that all the time. So it was definitely a personal problem that I had.
It's something that we've tried to work on too. We've reached out to many students where it's like, what can we do to help with this idea, with this processing of, like, okay, we're going through this material. It's going to be a lot, right? But if we told you that cloud code is going to take a year, a lot of people are going to be super hesitant, right? If we had live sessions like once a month kind of thing, it's going to be super hard to get people even motivated to try that. So we know we give you extensions and give you all the resources. I'm curious, and it doesn't need to be figured out on this. This is a complex question, but was there anything that, like, you think that you could have used that would have been helpful to just potentially not feel that much pressure, or I say, like, anxiety, whatever the feeling was for you, right, around the rushing of the material or getting through the content?
I would say I probably should have relied on my cohort members more. I was kind of doing it in my own little silo there. But again, that was my choice that I kind of have to live with. But, Cloud Code does a good job with providing the opportunities for your classmates to get together, work together, collaborate. So, as far as like a structure of the course, it's very straightforward, which I appreciate. My thing would be just taking advantage of the opportunities that are there to get with other individuals that, there's probably people in my cohort that are in the same boat, that we're having the same feelings. But if you kind of just stay over in your little corner, you're not going to know that, which makes it a little bit harder.
Totally makes sense. You always want there to be organic communications and that meshing between the groups and the cohorts and everybody that's participating. But there is that element of like, okay, can I, as the instructor or the program director, can I like kind of force that or lead people along a little bit better through it? So I just think it's an interesting one. It's definitely a complex issue, but it's one of those things that can take Cloud Code from being a really great program to being like an amazing one, right? Where you have somehow we're able to really cut through a lot of those barriers that people have. And that's really my job now, is like, what can I do to make the program just like that much better? Every cohort that we do just keeps pushing along. So I'm curious now, you've got these new skills, you've passed PD1. Have you been able to apply any of these development skills to your day-to-day life or into your actual job?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned before, I'm in consulting, so you're dealing with multiple clients. And the thing with the developer skills, specifically, the pro code side, so Apex, LWCs, you're able to be in conversations and provide better feedback to the client. So, a good example is one of the projects I was on, we were trying to do something with Flow and Omni Studio, which it's just another tool that Salesforce has. But being able to recommend LWCs and then having that validation with the certification, they kind of take your opinions a little bit more strong. They trust you, I guess, essentially. So you're able. So I guess to answer your question, you're able to be in those conversations, understands what's going on, and have the most efficient solution.
Yeah, I love it. Just to really hear that you're taking these skills. So it's one thing to learn it, but then to actually apply it to your work and to make sure that you're being heard in a lot of those conversations. That's a big one for a lot of the senior admins that we see come through, where maybe they don't want to code day to day, but being able to have the certification, being able to understand like error logs that come through ends up being super valuable for their roles, and they can position themselves just better in many different areas. So that's awesome to hear. Well, let's kind of wrap things up here. I'm curious if you have any future goals that you're looking at, or spend this time to do any shout outs to anybody. This is really your time to share any final thoughts or recommendations and give any shout outs that you want.
Yeah, you always got to thank your family. Many a time, my wife would come in and I'm like banging my head off the desk, and she's like, "What is your problem?" And I'm like, "I can't figure this out." I'd like to give a shout out to Riley Myers, and if that is his incorrect last name, I do apologize. But I definitely have his first name right, because I leaned on him heavily. He is one of the few people that I reached out to for help. I would say my instructors, they played a huge role in just understanding where I was. I'll give you a shout out too, like putting this together, because there is a sea of resources out there and they're not all as good as Cloud Code. I'll just say that. So the effort that you guys put in to provide a service to those people trying to get into development is huge. Another shout out, I think I mentioned earlier about YouTube tutorials, Matt Gary, Coding with the Force. That is I can't say enough about his content. The way he's been doing it for a long time. So
love Matt's content.
The way he structures his courses, if I can call them that, his playlist that he has, he's a very good teacher. Yeah, those are the big ones. I was kind of quiet on LinkedIn as far as like, hey, I'm going through Cloud Code, getting help that way. So I would say it's really all about the Cloud Code team, and then, like I had mentioned, finding somebody that is much better than you at coding, reach out to them. They're all very understanding.
Cool. I love it. And yes, I think everyone is starting to love Riley, and you got his last name right as well, because he's just in the cloud helping everybody out. And it's great to see that the community has been growing and coming together in such an awesome way. So yeah, Frank, it's been great talking with you. I know we've chatted before in various different areas and on the podcast as well, but glad to have you on, and super excited about your future and where the development side of that takes you. If there's ever anything you need, just give them a shout. We've got you in Slack and everything like that, and we'll keep moving forward from there.
Yeah, Warren, thanks for the opportunity. I can't say it enough. Like, you're only racing against yourself. So please, if you take anything from this, it would be that, keep your blinders on, if you will, on your own journey.
Wise words. And everybody will keep screaming it from the rooftops, right? Great having you on, and hopefully we see more from you.
Yes, sir.